I remember when I first started my business. It was a small idea that quickly turned into something that almost ruined me. Back in 2015, I had just graduated from college and was living in my small apartment in a city that was growing rapidly. The cost of living was rising, and everyone around me seemed to be getting into tech or some other trendy startup. My friends were either climbing the corporate ladder or working on side hustles, but I wasn't sure where I fit in. I had always been a problem solver, and I thought that maybe I could start a business that would help solve everyday issues for people. It seemed like the logical next step after graduation, or at least better than the 9 to 5 job that everyone else was getting into. I had no money, no connections, and most importantly, no real business experience, but I had a decent amount of drive and some time on my hands. I knew I had to start small, so I began by researching pain points people face every day. After weeks of late-night brainstorming and reading endless forums and blogs, I came across an issue that seemed to be common in my city. People were constantly complaining about the lack of affordable and reliable home cleaning services. People wanted convenience, but they didn't want to pay a fortune for it. I thought to myself, this is it. This is the business I can start with very little upfront cost. I began researching the home cleaning industry, which, at the time, seemed to be growing steadily. I made a few calls to cleaning service companies, asking them how they managed to get clients and what they charged. Then, I realized that most of them didn't have a strong online presence, and most people who needed home cleaning were either looking for affordable rates or just didn't trust the big agencies. I saw a massive gap in the market. There was a need for affordable, trustworthy, and easily accessible cleaning services. With that realization, I set to work building a simple website and social media profiles. At the time, I had no experience in web development, but I managed to cobble together a website using a free template. I didn't have a lot of money to spend on ads, so I relied on organic social media posts and word of mouth. I set up a Google My Business account and did everything I could to ensure my service would pop up when people searched for cleaning services in the area. I didn't expect it to take off immediately, but I started getting a few calls here and there. It was a slow start. In the first month, I managed to land only 3 clients. These clients were friends of friends, and I was doing the cleaning myself with my own hands. It was exhausting work, but I felt like I was on the right track. I started offering discounts for referrals, which helped a little, and I tried to streamline my process as much as possible. But no matter how hard I tried, I was barely breaking even. Then came a pivotal moment. About 6 months into the business, I hit a rough patch. My savings were nearly gone, and I was struggling to get enough work to make ends meet. I was almost ready to quit, and the stress was starting to affect my health. I remember sitting in my apartment one night, staring at my laptop, thinking, what am I even doing? I'm burning through all my money and still not making a profit. Maybe I should just get a regular job and forget this whole business thing. But then something clicked. I realized that my biggest problem wasn't the lack of clients. It was the lack of visibility. My website was barely getting traffic, and while I had gotten a few clients from friends and family, I wasn't reaching enough new people. So, I decided to pivot. Instead of trying to do everything on my own, I would focus on what I could control, building an online presence. I decided to invest in Facebook ads, something I had been too scared to try before. I spent the last of my savings on targeted Facebook ads. I knew this could either make or break me. I crafted an ad that focused on the pain point I knew people felt: expensive, unreliable, and impersonal cleaning services. I offered a special deal for first-time clients, and I made sure the ad targeted people within a 15-mile radius of my city. It was a gamble, but I knew that if I didn't do something drastic, I would have to shut the business down. The first week, I didn't get much traction. But then, on the second week, the leads started coming in. At first, just a few calls. Then, it was 5, 10, and by the end of the month, I had booked over 30 clients. The response was overwhelming. People were responding to the ad, reaching out, and booking cleaning appointments. I was swamped, but I kept pushing through. I hired 2 part-time cleaners to help me manage the workload. That's when I started seeing the true potential of my business. Within a few months, the business took off. I was able to expand to more areas of the city, hire more employees, and scale my marketing. The key to success wasn't the initial idea or the hard work. It was realizing that visibility was what mattered the most. I had underestimated the power of online advertising and digital marketing. By building an effective ad campaign, I was able to attract enough clients to grow my business, and it started to pay off. Fast forward to today, and my business is no longer a small operation. I now run a full-fledged cleaning company with over 30 employees. We have multiple offices in different cities, and we service hundreds of clients every month. What started as a small side project is now a six-figure business, and I've learned more about entrepreneurship than I ever thought possible. I never would have believed that my little idea could turn into something so big. The biggest lesson I learned through this whole process is that entrepreneurship is not about having the perfect product or idea. It's about persistence, adaptability, and the willingness to learn from your mistakes. There will always be moments of doubt, and you will face obstacles that seem insurmountable. But if you keep pushing forward and adapt to changing circumstances, you can turn things around. Looking back, I can't believe how close I came to quitting. If I had given up during that rough patch, I never would have reached this point. I'm now more confident than ever in my ability to build and grow businesses, and I'm constantly looking for new opportunities. The journey hasn't been easy, but it's been worth every single moment. I hope my story serves as a reminder to anyone who's struggling. Perseverance pays off, and success is often just one step away from quitting. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I've been an entrepreneur for the past 12 years. I started my first business when I was 22, fresh out of college, with no real experience and barely any savings to my name. I didn't have a mentor, a solid plan, or any understanding of what it meant to run a business. But what I did have was a burning desire to be successful, and that drive got me through some incredibly tough times. It all started in a small town in the Midwest. After I graduated with a degree in marketing, I took a job working for a tech company in the city. The company was fast-paced, and I quickly learned the ins and outs of the business world. But something didn't sit right with me. I was surrounded by people in their 30s and 40s, all working 60-hour weeks, and I could already see the toll it was taking on them. They were successful, but at what cost? One day, while sitting at my desk, I had an epiphany. What if I could start my own business and build something where I didn't have to sacrifice my life for work? I didn't want to end up like my colleagues, tired and stressed, living for the weekends. So, I decided to leave my job and take a leap of faith. The first few months were brutal. I had no clear business plan and was bouncing around ideas, trying to find something that would work. After a lot of trial and error, I decided to create a digital marketing agency. It seemed like a safe bet at the time. Everyone needed online marketing, and I already had some experience in the field. So, I scraped together what little savings I had, built a basic website, and started pitching my services. For the first few months, I didn't get a single client. I spent hours cold calling businesses, sending emails, and trying to network, but nothing seemed to work. There were days when I seriously considered throwing in the towel. I was living off of ramen noodles, and my rent was due in just a few days. I remember feeling like a failure. I would lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what I had gotten myself into. But somehow, I kept going. Then, one day, out of the blue, a local restaurant reached out to me. They were looking for someone to help them improve their online presence. It wasn't a huge deal, but it was something. I was ecstatic. I worked around the clock to help them. I revamped their website, created social media ads, and managed their Google My Business page. The results were immediate. Their online traffic grew, and they started getting more customers. After that, word of mouth started to spread. Slowly but surely, I started picking up more clients. I went from 1 client to 5, then 10, then 20. I couldn't believe it. But with each new client came a new set of challenges. Managing multiple clients while trying to grow my business was tough, and I had to learn quickly how to delegate tasks. I hired a freelancer to help with design and another one to handle social media management. I also invested in a project management tool to keep everything organized. The turning point came 2 years into my business when I landed a contract with a mid-sized tech startup. This was the big break I had been waiting for. They had a large budget and a solid product, but their online presence was practically non-existent. I poured everything I had into this project, putting in 80-hour weeks to make sure it was perfect. In the end, I helped them increase their online sales by 300% in just 6 months. From that point on, things took off. The referrals came in faster than I could handle. My business was growing exponentially, but with that growth came a whole new set of challenges. As my client base expanded, so did the pressure. I had to hire more employees, set up processes, and scale my operations. It was no longer just me and a couple of freelancers working out of my apartment. I moved into an office, hired a team of 10, and began offering more services. We expanded into SEO, pay-per-click advertising, and even web development. But even with all of the success, I still felt like something was missing. I wasn't happy. I had built this business, but I had sacrificed so much along the way. I had alienated friends and family, neglected my health, and worked myself into the ground. I was burned out. I took a step back and started reevaluating my life. I realized that success wasn't just about money or how many clients you had. It was about balance. I needed to make changes in my life. So, I implemented new work hours, hired a COO to handle the day-to-day operations, and started taking time off to focus on my mental and physical health. I also began mentoring other entrepreneurs. I realized that one of the best ways to learn and grow was by sharing my knowledge with others. I started giving talks at local meetups, helping other small business owners avoid the same mistakes I made. I found purpose in helping others succeed, and in turn, it helped me find my own happiness again. Looking back, I'm proud of how far I've come. From that first client to a multi-million-dollar company, it's been an incredible journey. I learned so much along the way, not just about business, but about myself. I've learned that entrepreneurship isn't just about making money. It's about building something that can make a real impact on people's lives. Now, my business is thriving, and I'm able to enjoy a healthy work-life balance. I've built a team of dedicated people who share my vision, and together, we continue to grow and innovate. I've also started investing in other small businesses, helping them grow and succeed in the same way I did. To anyone thinking about starting their own business, my advice is simple: just start. It won't be easy, and there will be times when you'll feel like giving up, but the only way to truly succeed is by failing, learning, and never giving up. The road to entrepreneurship is not a straight line. It's filled with bumps, detours, and unexpected turns. But it's also one of the most rewarding experiences you can have. Don't wait for the perfect moment or the perfect plan. Just take that first step, and the rest will follow. I never thought I'd become an entrepreneur. It wasn't something that I dreamed about as a kid, nor did I have any family members who ran their own businesses. I grew up in a small town, with simple values and expectations. College wasn't an option for me. I didn't get the grades in high school and couldn't afford the tuition. But I've always been the type to make do with what I had. After high school, I took up a job at a local coffee shop. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. Over time, I worked my way up from barista to shift manager. I liked the work. It wasn't high stress, but it kept me moving. I spent hours each day making drinks, talking to regulars, and learning the ins and outs of running a business. But I always felt like something was missing. One evening, I was working the counter when a regular came in, an older gentleman named Mr. Duncan. He'd been coming in for years, always ordering the same thing: black coffee, no sugar. One day, he struck up a conversation with me as I was preparing his order. "Hey, kid," he said, leaning across the counter with a smile. "You ever thought about starting your own business?" I chuckled, partly because the thought had never crossed my mind, but also because I didn't think people like me had what it took to be an entrepreneur. "Not really," I replied. "I don't have the money or the experience." Mr. Duncan nodded thoughtfully. "No one does at first. But if you can manage this place, you've got what it takes to manage anything. You just need an idea." That conversation stuck with me. I didn't know it at the time, but those words would change everything. A few months later, I found myself tired of the grind. The coffee shop was fine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was capable of more. I was spending my days making drinks for people, but I wasn't building anything meaningful. One day, I left my shift and walked down the street to a bookstore. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, but I started browsing the business section. There was a book called The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. The title intrigued me. I'd heard of startups before, but never thought they were something for someone like me. I grabbed the book, and by the time I reached the counter, I knew my life was about to change. I devoured that book in a week. I learned about creating a minimum viable product, the importance of iteration, and how the most successful businesses started small and grew over time. I was hooked. I started researching other books and podcasts, diving deep into the world of entrepreneurship. I had no idea what kind of business I wanted to start, but I knew I had to try. I started brainstorming ideas based on what I knew best, coffee. It didn't take long before I had a vague idea for a mobile coffee cart. I'd seen food trucks in bigger cities, and the thought of bringing quality coffee to people wherever they were appealed to me. But I had no money to buy a food truck. That's when I got the idea to build my own coffee cart. It wouldn't be anything fancy at first, just a small cart that I could push around. I started researching how to build one, watching YouTube videos and reading DIY forums. Eventually, I put together a plan to create a mobile coffee cart using parts one could find at hardware stores and scrap yards. I started saving every penny I could from my shifts at the coffee shop. Every tip, every hour of overtime, I put into my project. In the meantime, I spent hours after work sketching out the design for my cart. I knew I needed to keep it simple, so it would be affordable, but I also wanted it to be functional. After several months of working on the cart, I finally had a basic version ready. It wasn't perfect, but it was good enough. I figured I could test the waters and see if people would actually pay for my coffee. I reached out to a few local events, street fairs, farmers markets, and even some outdoor concerts. To my surprise, I got a few yes. With no real expectations, I packed up my cart and headed out to my first event. The first few hours were slow, but then something clicked. People were curious. They'd never seen a coffee cart like mine, and they were intrigued by the fact that I was serving quality coffee at a fair price. I wasn't making a fortune, but I was making enough to cover my costs and then some. And the feedback I got from customers was overwhelmingly positive. Over the next few months, I kept showing up at local events. My cart became more refined as I figured out what worked and what didn't. I invested in better equipment and learned how to streamline my process. Every dollar I made went straight back into the business. I hired a couple of friends to help, and soon enough, I had a small team. By the end of that year, I'd saved enough money to buy a second, larger cart. I expanded to even more events and began to look for new opportunities to grow my business. I realized that I didn't just want to be another mobile coffee cart. I wanted to create a brand, a business that stood for quality and community. With the success of my coffee cart, I started to think bigger. I had a vision for a brick-and-mortar location, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. I looked for a small space in the heart of town. It was a rundown building, but I saw potential in it. After securing a loan, I took the plunge and opened my first coffee shop. It was a huge risk. I spent months redesigning the space, sourcing furniture, and hiring a team. I leaned heavily on my savings and relied on the small but loyal customer base I had built up over the last couple of years. Opening day was nerve-wracking. I wasn't sure if people would show up, but I had faith in the brand I was building. To my surprise, the shop was packed from the moment we opened. People loved the atmosphere, the quality of the coffee, and the fact that it felt like a community space. It wasn't smooth sailing after that. The first year was filled with challenges, competition from bigger chains, issues with suppliers, and the pressure of managing both the cart and the shop. But I kept pushing forward. I took on more debt to expand, worked tirelessly to improve every aspect of the business, and relied on the loyal customers who had supported me from the start. Fast forward 5 years, and I now have 3 locations. My original coffee cart is still running strong, and my brand has expanded beyond just coffee. Now we serve baked goods, sandwiches, and other items. I never thought it would grow this big. I'm proud of what I've accomplished, and while there have been some tough moments, I wouldn't trade the journey for anything. Looking back, I realized that the key to my success wasn't having a huge amount of money or experience. It was about perseverance. It was about starting with what I had and continuously working to improve. I'll always be grateful to Mr. Duncan for sparking that initial conversation, but most of all, I'm thankful that I took the leap and pursued something I never thought possible. The road wasn't easy, but it was worth it. When I was 25, I was $62,000 in debt, eating canned chili 5 nights a week, and sleeping on a mattress on the floor of a 2-bedroom apartment that I shared with 2 other guys. Today, I run a tech company that grosses $4.3 million annually, and I still don't own a car. Here's the story of how I went from being broke and borderline depressed to building something real, and why I wouldn't trade the struggle for anything. I graduated with a degree in business marketing that I now believe prepared me for absolutely nothing useful. I worked a series of terrible jobs after college, retail, a telemarketing gig that made me hate humanity, and a short-lived stint as an assistant at a luxury lifestyle firm, which was code for helping influencers make TikToks about products they didn't use. The turning point came during the pandemic. I got laid off from the assistant gig, couldn't pay rent, and ended up moving back to my hometown in Ohio. My pride took a massive hit. One night, in my childhood bedroom, I started scrolling Reddit like I used to in college. That's when I stumbled into r/entrepreneur and then r/startups. Something clicked. These people were building things, failing, trying again. I suddenly remembered how I used to make simple websites for local businesses in high school for pizza money. It wasn't groundbreaking, but it was something. The idea that would change my life didn't come in a burst of genius. It came from a friend of a friend, Dan, who ran a small landscaping business. He was struggling to manage his quotes and invoices and asked me if I knew anything about automating stuff. I didn't, really, but I told him I'd look into it. I built him a basic web app using a low-code platform. I won't say which, but it rhymes with no flow. It wasn't fancy, but it worked. It let him generate quotes, send invoices, track payments. 2 weeks later, he paid me $500. I hadn't seen that much money for freelance work in years. More importantly, 2 of his buddies called me the next month asking for something similar. I didn't even have a name for the tool yet. I was calling it Landsnap at the time, which in retrospect sounds like a real estate knockoff. I registered an LLC with LegalZoom and made the dumbest logo you've ever seen in Canva. But I started thinking, what if I could make this a SaaS product? The first real version of the product was duct taped together in Bubble, ran on Airtable, and looked like a Craigslist page from 2003. But somehow, 12 local contractors signed up, and I started charging $29/month. My first recurring revenue, $348/month, felt like winning the lottery. But I hit a wall. My users kept asking for features I couldn't deliver without writing real code. I had 2 choices, find a technical co-founder or learn to code. I did both. I met Sean through Indie Hackers. He was working full-time at a bank and hated it. I pitched him equity and ramen wages. He said yes. For 6 months, we worked from his basement every night after his 9 to 5 and my freelance gigs. We rewrote everything in React and Firebase. I cold emailed over 200 contractors across the Midwest. Got blocked, ignored, cursed out. But a few said yes. One of them, big client out of Indiana, had 48 employees and signed up for $299/month. By year 2, we had 1,100 paying users and hit $20K MRR. We were profitable, finally. I paid off my student loans and got myself a real bed. We started getting some attention in niche contractor communities. A well-known landscaping YouTuber did a 10-minute walkthrough of our platform. He liked that we didn't try to upsell him. Our signups tripled in 2 weeks. Then came our first acquisition offer, $1.2 million. I almost said yes. But Sean, quiet and always grounded, asked one question that stuck with me. Do you want to win? Or do you want to build something lasting? We said no. Instead, we raised a small angel round, $150K from a group of founders we met on Twitter. That gave us enough runway to build mobile apps and hire a designer who actually knew what they were doing. We rebranded to JobNest. Yes, better than Landsnap, I know. We built out integrations with QuickBooks, Stripe, and Google Calendar. Suddenly, small businesses were using us to manage their entire backend. Now we're at 4,700 active customers. We have a team of 14 people, 5 developers, 2 customer support reps, 3 in sales, and the rest in product and ops. We do over $350K/month in revenue, and churn is under 3%. We've bootstrapped growth for the past 2 years without taking another dime of outside money. I still don't take a huge salary. Most months, I pay myself $4,000, and I live in a small but decent apartment. I could buy a Tesla, but I still Uber most places or bike. People think that's crazy, but it keeps me focused. I don't want lifestyle creep to mess with my drive. Here's what I've learned the hard way. You don't need to be a genius to start a business, but you do need to be obsessive. Niche markets are the most underrated opportunity in SaaS. The riches are in the ditches. Cold outreach works if you personalize it and actually give a damn about the people you're emailing. Design matters more than you think, especially if you're selling to non-technical people. Early users will guide you to product market fit if you listen harder than you talk. Don't try to be cool with your startup. Solve real problems for real people. Last year, I went back to Ohio to visit my parents. I walked by my old room, the one where I was eating chili and wondering what I was doing with my life. I took a picture and printed it. It hangs on the wall in my office now, right above my screen. Every day, I look at it and remember, no one is coming to save you. But if you build something that helps people, they'll show up. And if you're lucky, they'll pay you for it. That's all the motivation I need. I started my first business with $92 and a borrowed lawnmower. I was 24, broke, recently dumped, and had just been let go from my third job in 14 months. I had a marketing degree, 2 roommates, and a Honda Civic with 186,000 miles on it. I'd moved back to my hometown in Illinois after college hoping things would click eventually, but nothing ever did. The day after I got fired, I sat in the garage of my parents' house, chain smoking and thinking about how I'd become the family disappointment. My mom came out to check on me, saw the look on my face, and just asked, "What do you need right now?" I blurted out, "A way to not feel like ing failure." She didn't say anything. The next morning, she handed me my late grandfather's dusty old Honda push mower and said, "It still works." I wish I could say I had some master plan, but honestly, I didn't. I just needed to make some cash. I printed 50 flyers that said, "Need your lawn mowed cheap? Local guy with mower. $20 flat rate. Text me." I walked my neighborhood for hours, taping them to mailboxes and street poles. That weekend I got 2 texts. 2. But I showed up, on time, in the brutal heat, and mowed both lawns like I was auditioning for a gardening championship. I made $40. Bought gas, more flyers, and Gatorade. Week 2, I got 5 jobs. Week 3, 8. My back hurt, my hands were blistered, but for the first time in months, I slept like a human being. I started learning how to upsell. I'll edge the driveway for $5 more. Or want your hedges trimmed? Most people said yes. I watched YouTube videos at night about how to cut different types of grass, how to stripe a lawn, how to fix a pull cord. After about 6 weeks, I cleared about $100. I used $300 to buy a used trimmer and leaf blower off Facebook Marketplace. With the better equipment, I could take on bigger yards and make them look cleaner, faster. I was still a one-man band, but I was getting the hang of it. That's when I got my first commercial client, a dentist's office. The receptionist said she'd seen me mowing a house on her street and liked how clean it looked. I charged her $60 a week. She never blinked. I walked out of that office high on adrenaline. I wasn't just some broke kid mowing lawns. I was a business. By the end of the summer, I had 23 regular clients. I printed a couple of cheap polo shirts with my logo, which I made on Canva. I registered an LLC online and named the company Clean Cut. Corny? Sure. But it stuck. The next year was chaos. I hired my cousin, who'd just come back from the Navy, and my old high school friend, Matt, who hated his office job. I paid them both more than I paid myself. I used a $6,000 loan to buy a trailer and a zero-turn mower. We worked 6 days a week from March to November. Sundays I'd do admin work, scheduling, invoicing, ordering parts. I learned how to read contracts, deal with taxes, and what the hell a P/NL was. I also learned some clients would try to screw you every chance they got, and that being the nice guy doesn't mean being a pushover. We grossed $84,000 that year. After expenses, I had about $19K to my name. But it was mine. Earned, not handed over. I'd never been prouder. Year 3, we doubled that. I expanded to pressure washing, gutter cleaning, seasonal decorations. Anything to avoid the winter dip in revenue. I also started doing SEO for the company website. I learned enough to get us to the first page locally. I remember one day in June, pulling up to a job site in a truck with my logo on the side, 2 employees unloading gear, and a client coming out to greet us with coffee. I felt like a goddamn grown-up. Then came the flood. Literally. In year 4, an insane storm flooded half the city. Several of our trailers were damaged. Our storage unit got wiped out. Thousands of dollars of equipment were ruined. Insurance fought me on every claim. I had $7,000 left in the business account. Payroll was due in 4 days. I sat in my car behind a 7-Eleven and cried for the first time in years. Real, ugly sobs. I called my dad, ashamed, and he just said, "This is the part no one posts about. Dig in." So I did. I negotiated payment plans with the crew. I maxed out a credit card for a backup mower. I offered 24-hour emergency yard cleanups, and we worked for 17 days straight. We broke even that month. Not great, but not dead. That year taught me more about resilience than all the good years combined. By year 5, I was running a 6-figure company with 5 employees, 3 trucks, and a part-time office assistant. I'd long since paid off the initial loan. I finally moved out of my apartment and bought a small house. This spring, we landed our biggest contract ever, the City Parks Department. It's worth $287,000 annually. I signed the contract wearing a tie I borrowed from my cousin. Last week, I hired my little brother for the summer. He's 17 and doesn't know what he wants to do with his life. I gave him the same advice my mom gave me, back when all I had was $92 and a lawnmower. You don't have to know. Just start. And if you're reading this, broke and pissed, and wondering what the hell comes next, I get it. You don't have to know the end of the road. Just start moving. I was 27 when I got fired from the startup I helped build from scratch. No severance, no warning. Just a meeting at 9 a.m., and we're going in a different direction. The kicker? The company had just closed a $12 million Series A the week before. I had been diluted down to barely 0.3% equity. 3 years of 80-hour weeks and missed birthdays, flushed. I was angry, humiliated, but more than anything, scared. I had about $3,200 in savings, a 10-year-old Honda, and a lease ending in 2 months. And a startup idea I had shelved 2 years earlier. It was called Courier Collective. The idea was born when my friend Max, a freelance bike courier, complained that his app took 35% commission. I started talking to other couriers, Uber Eats, DoorDash, Postmates runners. Same story. High fees, little support, inconsistent pay. What if I could build a platform that actually treated couriers like partners, not expendable pieces of logistics? I never pursued it because I got caught up in the real startup I'd been working on. But now, fired and broke, I figured, what the hell? The first month was chaos. I signed up to do delivery myself. Partly to eat, partly to learn. I worked every major delivery app in San Francisco, studied their flows, took notes, talked to other couriers at pickup spots. The consensus was clear. Everyone hated the apps, but there weren't any better options. I built a basic prototype using Bubble and some Zapier automations. It wasn't pretty, but it let couriers sign up, get orders routed from restaurants I cold called, and keep 90% of the fees. I launched a pilot with 5 couriers and 3 restaurants in the Mission District. My pitch was simple. We don't take much, we show up, and we're human. The first 60 days were brutal. I was customer service, dev support, biz dev, and courier number 6 when someone flaked. I lived on oatmeal and instant coffee. I slept on a futon in a friend's garage. I told myself I had 6 months to prove this thing could live. By month 3, we had 20 couriers. By month 4, 45. Our retention rate among couriers was over 80%. Restaurants started calling me. They were sick of paying 25 to 30% in fees and dealing with anonymous, unreliable drivers. The turning point came when one of the couriers, Lana, tweeted a video of her earnings compared to what she used to make on Uber Eats. It went viral. We got 2,000 courier signups in a weekend and over 500 restaurant inquiries. I didn't sleep for 72 hours. I raised a $250,000 angel round a month later. Not from VCs, but from 3 ex-founders who had heard about what I was building and wanted to back a mission. I hired 2 engineers, a support rep, and rented a co-working space with actual chairs. Our growth from there wasn't hyper, but it was real. We focused only on 3 zip codes in SF for almost a year. I resisted pressure to expand to LA or New York. Every time someone asked why we weren't growing faster, I told them, we're not a rocket ship, we're a long-haul truck. The community aspect became our differentiator. We hosted monthly courier meetups. We offered emergency cash advances. We even started a shared health benefits pool, small at first, but meaningful. We were a collective in more than name. 2 years in, we hit $1.2 million in revenue with just under 9% take rate. We were profitable on a per-market basis. That's when the VCs started circling again. I took a few meetings, out of curiosity more than anything. Most didn't get it. One guy in particular, I won't name names, told me, "You've built a great nonprofit vibe, but this isn't a scalable company." That one stung. But 6 months later, a national chain approached us about piloting Courier Collective in 20 cities. They wanted ethical delivery. Their Gen Z customers were demanding it. We negotiated hard. I hired a lawyer who'd been burned by DoorDash before. We got a deal that let us scale on our terms. Year 3 was insane. We expanded to 12 cities, grew the team to 40, and crossed $10 million in gross volume. Our courier net income was the highest in the industry. We weren't flashy. No scooters with logos. No Super Bowl ads. Just trust. A few months ago, a big company, yeah, one of those, offered to acquire us for $48 million. I said no. I'm not allergic to exits. I'm not trying to die at my desk. But this was never about a big payday. This was about proving that you could build a platform that doesn't exploit the people who power it. We're not perfect. We've had screw-ups, bugs, delays, some shady actors we had to ban. But we've built something that works because it treats people like people. Simple as that. So yeah, fired at 27. Broke. Angry. Desperate. And now, at 31, I run a company that feeds over 8,000 couriers every month and has never taken a single dollar from a mega fund. Courier Collective is still not a rocket ship, but it's a damn good truck. I never meant to become an entrepreneur. Hell, I barely passed college. I was 28, broke, and working the night shift at a gas station in the middle of nowhere when everything changed. It started with a vending machine. The station had this old, half-broken vending machine from the 90s that still sold candy bars and soda for $1. It jammed constantly, and half the buttons didn't work. One night, this tech guy in a Tesla pulled up for gas, and we got to chatting. He saw me kicking the machine, trying to unjam a stuck Snickers, and said, "You know you can buy those on liquidation sites for, like, $200. Fix it up and flip it." I didn't think much of it. But after he left, I looked up vending machines for sale on my phone. Sure enough, there were tons listed, some for as low as $150. Most needed repairs. I didn't know a damn thing about vending machines, but I knew how to Google, and that's a start. So I used $300 of my last $500 to buy a janky old combo machine off Facebook Marketplace. Hauled it to my buddy Josh's garage with a U-Haul. Josh was one of those guys who could fix anything for the price of a six-pack. Over the next week, we took it apart, cleaned it, replaced a coin sensor we found on eBay, and got the card reader working. Then came the hard part, where to put it. I started cold calling small businesses, auto shops, laundromats, co-working spaces. Got 42 rejections. On the 43rd, a martial arts gym owner named Barry said, "Sure, why not? We've got kids hanging around all the time." I offered to stock it, maintain it, and give him 10% of the take. Stocking it was another learning curve. I had no clue what kids wanted. I went with a basic spread: Gatorade, water, Doritos, Snickers, gum. First week made $27. The second, $42. Then $65. After a month, I had made back my investment. That tiny win felt like a miracle. So I bought another machine. This time, I was smarter. I found a newer model, already working. Paid $400. Landed it in a church that hosted youth events. Then another in a local DMV. By month 5, I had 6 machines making me about $200 after costs. Still working the night shift, still dead tired all the time. But something was happening. Then came the twist. Josh's cousin worked at a big logistics warehouse, hundreds of employees, and their vending supplier had just ghosted them. I pitched them on replacing their setup. They agreed, and I panicked. I needed to buy and install 4 machines, fast. I maxed my credit card and borrowed $200 from my mom. Found 4 refurbished machines from a guy in Jersey and hired a Craigslist mover to get them to the warehouse. That warehouse changed everything. With that account, I was clearing $2,000/month just from those machines. By the end of year 1, I had 23 machines. I quit the gas station job. Year 2, I leaned into bulk deals. I found a niche, medium-sized companies, 50 to 200 employees, that didn't have vending contracts. I started offering a micromarket model, small corner stores with open shelving, scanners, and coolers, all self-checkout, with an App One license from a startup. It felt high-tech, even though I was still driving a 2007 Civic with no AC. By year 3, I had 80 machines in 4 micro-markets. I hired Josh full-time. Then I brought on his sister to handle logistics. We operated out of a sketchy warehouse we leased for $900 month. I paid myself $40K a year, barely more than I made at the gas station, but I plowed the rest back into growth. Then COVID hit. I lost 70% of my business in 2 months. Offices closed. Schools shut down. Gyms? Done. I sat in my warehouse surrounded by pallets of Doritos and Pepsi, watching my world crumble. I almost gave up. Thought about selling the machines for scrap. Then I got an email from a property manager. They oversaw low-income housing units, people were stuck inside, stores weren't nearby, and they wanted to know if I could install vending machines in some of their lobbies. Contactless, card-only, snack-heavy. I deployed 5 machines within a week. That saved us. Within 2 months, I had machines in 30 buildings. Revenue came back. By the end of the year, we were actually up 20%. We rebranded as a Last Yard retail company. Started selling pantry staples, canned soup, detergent, toilet paper, alongside snacks. I wrote a business plan, applied for a city grant, and got $50,000 to expand into more underserved areas. In year 5, we were in 220 locations. We offered health-conscious options, worked with local suppliers, and installed machines with solar panels and smart inventory tracking. I was still living in a crappy apartment, but I employed 14 people. Then, one of my early customers, Barry, the martial arts gym guy, called me. "Hey," he said, "my cousin works in property tech. They're looking for partners to install retail vending in 1,000 new apartment buildings next year. Want me to connect you?" I said yes. That one call landed me a contract that would triple our size. We had to scale up fast: real software, fleet tracking, customer service. I brought on a CTO, outsourced development of our own vending OS, and raised a small round from local investors. Last year, we cleared $4.2 million in revenue. I still run the company. We're called Nook Retail now. We specialize in residential retail vending, everything from Tide Pods to ramen to plant-based jerky, 24/7, inside your building. We serve 16 cities. Our average unit does $860/month. The craziest part? Every machine still has a candy slot with Snickers in it. I keep that there as a reminder, because sometimes the thing that saves your life is the one that just won't come out of the damn vending machine. I started my first real business in the most humiliating way possible, by getting fired in front of my entire team. I was working as a project manager at a mid-sized marketing agency in Chicago. I was 27, had just gotten engaged, and thought I was doing pretty well in life. I had a good salary, a decent apartment, and the respect of my team. At least, I thought I did. The firing happened during our Monday morning check-in. My boss, Greg, a guy who called himself a visionary, but who once tried to trademark the word synergy, walked in with HR and didn't even let me speak. Apparently, I'd made a critical error by greenlighting a campaign for a client without his final approval. The client loved it, by the way. It had increased their conversions by 38%, but I digress. I packed my stuff in a box while everyone awkwardly avoided eye contact. One guy even muttered, "Damn, bro," under his breath. It was brutal. I spent the next 3 weeks in sweatpants, drinking too much gas station coffee and applying for jobs I didn't want. It was my fiancée, Amanda, who snapped me out of it. One night, while I was rage-scrolling LinkedIn, she asked, "Why don't you just start your own thing? You always said you could run a better agency than Greg." It felt like a dare, and it was enough to light the fuse. I didn't have much savings, about $7,200 in the bank after rent and expenses. No severance. No real assets. But I had a laptop, a decent portfolio, and 3 clients I'd built relationships with during my time at the agency. I reached out to them with a simple offer. I'd do the same work for 40% less. 2 of them said yes. I named the company Foxwell Digital after my mom's maiden name. It sounded classy and vaguely British. I bought a $12 domain and used a free Squarespace template. My office was our kitchen table, and Amanda became my unofficial assistant, unpaid therapist, and sometimes even a mock client when I needed to rehearse a pitch. The first 3 months were terrifying. I didn't sleep much. I'd work 14-hour days, trying to deliver top-tier service while also building proposals, handling invoicing, learning basic bookkeeping, and dealing with a constant, gnawing fear that I was one bad month away from disaster. But it grew. Slowly. I learned to ask for referrals. I joined a Slack group of other freelancers. I started offering free one-hour audits to companies and ended up converting a surprising number into paying clients. Within 6 months, I had 5 recurring clients and had made more than I had in my last year at the agency. Then came my first hire. Her name was Carla, a graphic designer I'd worked with before. I couldn't pay her full-time, but she agreed to do contract work for a flat monthly rate. She was fast, reliable, and made my half-baked ideas look like polished gold. With her on board, we looked more professional. We were more professional. Around month 9, something wild happened. I landed a client that was actually bigger than the agency I'd gotten fired from. They found me through one of those free audits I'd posted about on Twitter. We did a 3-month pilot, and when it ended, they offered a 12-month retainer at $18,000 a month. I remember staring at the email like it was a scam. I read it out loud to Amanda 3 times before replying. That client became the turning point. By the end of year 1, Foxwell Digital was pulling in $320,000 in revenue. I had 3 contractors and had moved from the kitchen table to a small co-working space that smelled like wet carpet but had free coffee. It felt like the Ritz. But with growth came chaos. I didn't know how to scale properly. I said yes to too much. I had no onboarding process, no contracts for half of my clients, and once accidentally invoiced someone $80 instead of $8,000. It was Carla who pulled me aside one day and said, "You need help or you're going to crash." So I did something I swore I never would. I hired a business coach. He cost $1,000 a month, which felt like setting fire to my savings. But in the first week, he had me rework all my client tiers, double my pricing, and set up automations that saved me 10 hours a week. He also made me hire a part-time virtual assistant who turned out to be a lifesaver. Fast forward to year 2. We crossed $780,000 in revenue. I took my first real vacation in 2 years, a long weekend in Colorado where I didn't check my email once. I even surprised Amanda by proposing again, properly this time, in the mountains. She cried and said yes again. Then came the pandemic. Every client froze budgets overnight. 3 canceled within 48 hours. My revenue dropped 70% in 1 week. I panicked, considered going back to a job. But instead, I sent a message to every past client and lead I had. If you need help staying visible during this time, I'll do a month of work at cost. That email saved us. 7 clients came back. 3 new ones signed. We pivoted hard into e-commerce, where businesses were still spending. Carla went full-time. We hired a copywriter and a media buyer. I learned how to let go of control and actually run a team, not just do everything myself. Today, Foxwell Digital has a team of 12. We cleared $2.4 million last year. We've worked with clients on 4 continents. And yes, Greg, the guy who fired me, his agency, it got bought out by a firm in New Jersey and folded 6 months later. I didn't cheer, but I won't lie. I toasted it with a $40 bottle of whiskey I used to think was too expensive to buy. I still work a lot, but I don't miss meetings that could have been emails, or office politics, or watching someone else get rich off my ideas. I work from home. I take Fridays off sometimes. I coach other freelancers on weekends for free because I remember exactly how scary that leap felt. The funny thing is, getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me. I just didn't know it at the time. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. 3 years ago, I was sleeping in my sister's basement after getting fired from my 3rd job in 2 years. I was 29, broke, and dangerously close to giving up on ever getting my life together. My dad had stopped returning my calls, and my friends were mostly polite but distant. I had burned a lot of bridges by constantly pitching half-baked business ideas and asking for money I couldn't pay back. But this story isn't about failure. It's about the one idea that finally worked, and how it went from a sketch in a notebook to a 7-figure exit 30 months later. Let me take you back to the beginning. I've always had this obsessive trait where I fixate on small, annoying problems and try to over-engineer solutions. In late 2021, I was doing freelance work on Fiverr, mostly editing resumes and LinkedIn profiles. One night, a client asked me to help organize his job applications. He had 30-plus applications in progress and wanted to track everything: deadlines, referrals, interview dates, follow-ups. I threw together a Google Sheet for him, with color coding and filters. It took me 2 hours. A week later, he emailed me again. "This is gold. Could you make a template I can share with my friends?" That was my light bulb moment. I started digging. Turns out, thousands of job seekers were using messy spreadsheets to track applications. There were forums full of people complaining about losing track of roles, forgetting to follow up, or missing deadlines. The only alternatives were clunky, outdated ATS, applicant tracking systems, built for recruiters, not candidates. So I did what any broke, over-caffeinated ex-freelancer would do. I built the MVP over a weekend. I used Glide, a no-code app builder, and created a super simple app called Job Tracker. It let users input job listings, attach resumes and cover letters, set reminders, and see everything on a dashboard. No frills, just functional. Then I posted it in 3 places. *a job search subreddit *, indie hackers *, a Facebook group. For recent grads. By the end of the week, 212 people had signed up. 2 weeks later, it was over 1,000. At first, I made it free. I just wanted feedback. Users started emailing me with suggestions, feature requests, even bug reports. I was stunned by how engaged people were. I added a $5/month pro plan that included resume version tracking, auto reminders, and analytics. 30 people paid the first month. That was $150. It felt like I had won the lottery. Encouraged, I doubled down. I built a website on Card, switched to Bubble for better customization, and rebranded as CareerOS. I added Stripe for payments, created a free onboarding guide, and started writing blog posts about job search strategies. I wasn't just selling a tool. I was helping people navigate a soul-crushing process. By month 6, I was making $500/month. Not life-changing, but enough to move out of the basement and into a cheap apartment. I was finally independent again. Then came the real breakthrough. A YouTuber with 200K subscribers made a video about tools every job seeker should use. He included CareerOS. I didn't even know it was coming. Overnight, my user base doubled. I went from 4,000 to 8,500 users in 5 days. My servers crashed twice. Stripe froze my payouts for suspicious activity. I thought I was done for. But instead, it forced me to get serious. I hired a part-time dev from Upwork. I invested in better hosting. I reworked the onboarding process. I added a referral system where users got a free month for every friend who joined. That summer, we hit $10K MRR. The next big leap came when a career coaching company reached out. They had 60 coaches and wanted to offer CareerOS to their clients. I didn't even have a team yet. I scrambled to build a multi-user dashboard and sold them a custom licensing plan for $2,000/month. From there, we expanded fast. I raised a small friends and family round, $75K, brought on a technical co-founder, and started building out real infrastructure. We moved off Bubble and built a native web app from scratch. I brought in a UX designer to polish everything. By year 2, CareerOS had 45,000 users, including a few big-name university career centers. We were doing $32K MRR with 17% churn and a 40% conversion rate from free to paid. Then came acquisition talks. A competitor reached out with an offer. I won't name them, but they were venture-backed and wanted to add a candidate-facing platform to their recruiter suite. Their initial offer was $600K. I said no. 6 weeks later, they came back with $1.2 million, all cash, with a 6-month transition period. I said yes. I walked away with just over $900K after taxes and payouts to my co-founder and early supporters. My sister cried when I told her. My dad called me for the first time in 18 months. But here's the truth no one tells you. I felt weirdly empty for a while after. You build something with everything you have, grind for years, and then, poof, it's gone. No Slack messages, no bug reports, no angry DMs, just silence. It took me a while to figure out what to do next. I took a long trip through Southeast Asia. I spent a stupid amount of money on courses I never finished. I even considered going back to school. But eventually, I found my groove again. I'm now working on a new product for freelancers, kind of a CRM and billing hybrid tool. I'm bootstrapping it, no investors this time. Just me, a laptop, and a lot of coffee. If there's one thing I've learned through all this, it's that the line between failure and success is razor thin. Career OS wasn't even close to my best idea. It was just the first one I finished, and finishing, shipping, launching, iterating is everything. Ideas are cheap. Execution is rare. Persistence is rarer. I wasn't smarter or more talented than the thousands of other people who had ideas like mine. I just didn't quit this time. If you're reading this from a basement, or a couch, or a crappy shared apartment wondering if your idea is dumb, build it anyway. Because maybe it is, but maybe it's not. And that maybe is all you need. I started my journey into entrepreneurship in my early 20s. At the time, I was living paycheck to paycheck, working a job that didn't really inspire me, but paid the bills. I remember thinking that there had to be something more than just the routine of 9 to 5 work. Everyone around me seemed content with the traditional path, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was meant for something different. I'd heard stories of people who had built empires from scratch, who had taken risks, failed, and then bounced back. I wanted to be one of those people. My idea for a business came to me one day after I realized that there was a major gap in the market. I'd been working at a coffee shop at the time, and I noticed how many customers would come in, order their drinks, and leave. There was little connection, no community building. I thought, why not create a space that goes beyond just selling coffee? I wanted to build a cafe where people could come together, work, meet new people, and genuinely enjoy their time. Not just a place to grab a quick cup of joe, but a full experience that people would look forward to visiting every day. I started researching the market and saw that while there were plenty of coffee shops, very few offered an environment designed to foster creativity and connection. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I had no savings, no investors, and no real business experience. But I had something more valuable: determination. I started by talking to everyone I knew about my idea, trying to gauge interest. I began attending local business networking events and seeking advice from those who had been successful. I made connections, learned about business management, and slowly began putting the pieces together. The first big challenge was getting funding. I had no collateral, no credit history, and no investors lined up. My family didn't have money to invest, and no one around me seemed willing to take a chance on me. I looked into small business loans, but with my financial situation, they didn't seem feasible. I didn't give up, though. I started a crowdfunding campaign, explaining my vision and how I wanted to build a space where people could come together, share ideas, and get inspired. To my surprise, it caught on. Small donations came in from strangers, and slowly I raised enough money to rent a space. With the money in hand, I leased a small storefront in a bustling part of town. The next challenge was designing the interior. I didn't have a lot of money to work with, so I had to get creative. I spent countless hours sourcing inexpensive furniture, doing DIY projects, and working with local artists to create a space that was unique and welcoming. I wanted it to feel like a home away from home for my customers. Opening day arrived, and I was both excited and terrified. The cafe had a soft opening, and to my surprise, people showed up. A few friends and family came, but there was also a steady stream of strangers who came in, curious about what we were offering. I served coffee, introduced myself to customers, and made an effort to get to know them. Over time, the cafe became more than just a place to get a cup of coffee. It became a community hub. People would come in to work, meet for business meetings, or just hang out with friends. It felt like I had created something that resonated with people. But as much as I loved the idea of my cafe being a success, the reality was much harder than I had anticipated. For the first year, I struggled. There were slow days where only a handful of customers came in, and then there were days when things were going well. But no matter what, the stress was overwhelming. I was the sole owner and operator, which meant I had to juggle everything, from making coffee, managing employees, cleaning, and paying bills. I was putting in 12-hour days, 7 days a week, and it felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. I began to question whether I had made the right decision. The pressure was mounting, and I thought about throwing in the towel. But then, something happened that changed everything. I received an email from a local business association inviting me to participate in a competition for Best New Business of the Year. At first, I was skeptical. My cafe wasn't even close to being perfect, but I decided to enter anyway. To my shock, we won. It wasn't just a trophy, it was the exposure that my cafe needed. Suddenly, people who hadn't even heard of us were coming through the doors, and word of mouth started to spread. After the award, things began to pick up. I hired more staff to take some of the pressure off, allowing me to focus on the bigger picture. I started to take a step back and think strategically. I introduced new products, began hosting events like open mic nights, and created a loyalty program that incentivized repeat customers. Slowly, the cafe's reputation grew, and so did its profitability. But even as things improved, I faced new challenges. Competition was fierce, and some of the other coffee shops around town started to take notice. They began offering similar events and products to try to steal my customers. The pressure to innovate and stay ahead of the competition never stopped. It wasn't enough to just be good. I had to be exceptional. Every time I thought I had caught up, something new would come up that required me to adapt. I learned that success wasn't a straight line. There were ups and downs, victories and setbacks. But through it all, I stayed focused on my mission, to create a space where people felt welcomed and connected. I learned to trust my instincts and to surround myself with a team that shared my vision. Eventually, I opened a second location, and then a third. Each new cafe was an opportunity to improve on the mistakes I had made with the first one, and to build something even better. Now, several years later, my cafe has become a staple in the community. It's no longer just about the coffee, it's about the experience, the people, and the culture we've built together. I've learned a lot along the way, that failure is just a part of the journey, that persistence and passion matter more than anything, and that success comes from doing something you truly believe in. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. There were moments when I didn't know if I'd make it, but I kept going because I believed in my vision. I didn't start with a fortune or a perfect plan, but I started with an idea and the willingness to make it happen. If there's one thing I've learned from this journey, it's that success doesn't come overnight. It takes time, effort, and an unrelenting drive to push through the tough times. To anyone thinking about starting their own business, my advice is simple: don't wait for the perfect moment. There will never be a perfect time to start. Just start, and be ready to learn, adapt, and keep pushing forward, even when it feels impossible. The road will be tough, but if you stay committed to your vision, the rewards are worth it. I remember the first day I stepped into the world of entrepreneurship, not knowing a single thing about what I was doing. It was 2015, and I was a 22-year-old college dropout with no clear direction in life. I had just moved into a small apartment in a city far from home, where I had to start over. I had no job, no clear career path, and most of my friends were either still in school or working regular 9-to-5 jobs. It felt like I was going nowhere. At the time, I was working as a waiter at a local restaurant just to make ends meet. My shifts were long, the tips were decent, but I knew deep down I wanted more. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life serving food to people who barely noticed me. I started spending my free time on Google, reading success stories about people who had started from nothing and built massive empires. I felt inspired by these stories, but I didn't know where to start. One evening, while browsing through Reddit, I came across a thread that changed everything. It was about starting an online business with a small budget, and the people in the thread were talking about selling products through dropshipping. I had never heard of it before, but the idea of running an online store without needing to handle inventory or shipping seemed perfect. It sounded too good to be true, but I was desperate, so I decided to give it a shot. The next day, I spent hours researching everything I could about dropshipping. I watched countless YouTube videos, read articles, and joined forums. Slowly but surely, the idea began to make sense. I figured that if I could find a niche product that people wanted and market it correctly, I could make some money. But I was still skeptical. How could I compete with all the other stores out there? I decided to focus on something I was passionate about: fitness. I had always been into fitness, and I knew there were millions of people out there who were also obsessed with getting in shape. After more research, I decided to start selling high-quality resistance bands. There were already a lot of fitness products on the market, but I found that many of them were overpriced or poorly made. I thought I could offer a better alternative by sourcing my products directly from suppliers. I spent weeks setting up my Shopify store, designing it, writing product descriptions, and figuring out how to run Facebook ads. I didn't have a lot of money, so I tried to keep the costs as low as possible. I spent a few $100s on ads to test the waters. The first week, nothing happened. No sales, no traffic, just crickets. I was disheartened, but I refused to give up. I decided to tweak my ads, focusing on specific demographics and interests, and I worked on improving the store's layout. Finally, after about a month, something amazing happened. I got my first sale. It wasn't much, just $20, but I felt like I had won the lottery. It was proof that my idea could work. I was ecstatic, but I knew I had to keep going. One sale wasn't enough. I needed to scale this thing. Over the next few months, I refined my marketing strategies, learned more about targeting specific audiences, and started seeing more and more sales come through. I had made enough to quit my waitressing job, and I dedicated myself full-time to growing my business. It wasn't easy. There were so many late nights, failed marketing campaigns, and moments where I thought about throwing in the towel. But the wins, no matter how small, kept me going. By the end of the first year, I had grossed $50,000 in sales. It wasn't a fortune, but for a 23-year-old who had started with nothing, it felt like a huge accomplishment. I reinvested almost everything into the business: better ads, more products, hiring a freelancer to help with customer service, and improving the website. Things were looking up. The following year, I decided to take the next big step, expanding into other fitness-related products. I added yoga mats, foam rollers, dumbbells, and supplements to my store. The business started to snowball, and my sales went up exponentially. I was making more money than I had ever imagined. But with that success came new challenges. For one, I was struggling to keep up with the demand. I didn't have the resources or systems in place to handle the volume of orders, and customer service was becoming a nightmare. I spent hours each day answering emails, handling returns, and trying to keep everything organized. I knew I needed help, but I was hesitant to hire anyone. What if I couldn't afford it? What if the business went under? But I couldn't do it all myself anymore, so I took the plunge and hired a small team. I brought on a customer service manager, a marketing specialist, and a few warehouse assistants to help with fulfillment. It was one of the best decisions I ever made. With a team in place, I was able to focus on growing the business even more. I started working on automation and systems to streamline the operation. I even started working on building my brand, something I hadn't focused on much in the beginning. Fast forward to 2020, and my business was thriving. I had expanded into new markets, launched a line of my own branded products, and built a loyal customer base. I had gone from that broke waiter to a six-figure entrepreneur. It felt surreal. There were still ups and downs, and not every decision I made was perfect, but I was living my dream. I had created something from nothing, and I was proud of it. But despite all my success, I had one major obstacle: burnout. The constant hustle, the pressure to keep growing, and the never-ending stress began to take a toll on me. I was always working, always checking my phone, always thinking about the business. I started to lose sight of the reason I started in the first place: freedom. In 2021, I decided to take a step back. I hired a CEO to oversee the day-to-day operations and began focusing more on my personal life. I took time to travel, spend time with family, and explore new interests. It was a difficult decision, but one that allowed me to reclaim the balance I had lost. Today, I still run the business, but I have a team that handles the heavy lifting. I'm more focused on the big picture, and I'm enjoying life more than I ever thought possible. Looking back, it's crazy to think about how far I've come. From the young college dropout who had no direction in life to a successful entrepreneur who now runs a business with over $1 million in annual revenue. The journey wasn't easy, but it was worth every single moment. The key takeaway? Don't be afraid to start small. Don't be afraid to fail. And most importantly, don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. Entrepreneurship is a long, hard road, but with persistence, resilience, and the willingness to learn, you can achieve things you never thought possible. I've always believed that success doesn't come from being handed opportunities on a silver platter. You have to create your own. But it took me a long time to learn that. This is the story of how I went from being a broke college dropout to running a multi-million-dollar business. It wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't glamorous at first. In fact, I'm still not entirely sure how I did it, but I've learned a lot along the way. I grew up in a small town, the kind where everyone knew everyone else's business. My parents were decent people, hardworking, but not wealthy by any means. My dad worked at the local factory, and my mom was a nurse at the community hospital. They instilled in me the value of hard work, but they also taught me the importance of education. So when I graduated high school, I followed the traditional path. I went to college, thinking it was the way to get ahead in life. But college wasn't for me. I was struggling academically, and the debt I was piling up felt like it was strangling me. After 2 years of feeling like I wasn't going anywhere, I made the decision to drop out. It wasn't an easy choice, and my parents were not happy about it. But I was young, stubborn, and convinced that I had a better way forward. So, with no degree and a growing sense of urgency, I moved to the city. I started out doing odd jobs, working as a waiter, delivering pizzas, and even briefly working at a call center. I learned quickly that these jobs weren't going to get me anywhere, but I also learned something important. You don't get what you want by working for someone else. You get what you want by creating something of your own. It was during this time that I started learning about digital marketing and e-commerce. I had always been somewhat tech-savvy, so the idea of building an online business intrigued me. I didn't have much money, but I had plenty of time and energy. I spent every waking hour reading blogs, watching YouTube tutorials, and listening to podcasts about how to start an online business. Eventually, I settled on the idea of starting a dropshipping business. I didn't have to invest in inventory up front, and I could run the whole operation from my laptop. I knew that I had to act fast, but I also knew that I didn't have the luxury of making mistakes. I had no savings, no safety net, and no fallback plan. So, I threw myself into it, learning everything I could about finding profitable products, building a website, and running Facebook ads. It wasn't smooth sailing. I remember my first few weeks of launching the site, checking my stats every day and seeing zero sales. I was constantly tweaking the website, trying to make it perfect, but nothing seemed to work. The first sale came almost by accident. It was a random customer who bought a $20 product. I couldn't believe it. I'd spent hours researching, setting up ads, and perfecting my site, and someone actually trusted me enough to buy something. That moment, although small, was a turning point. I realized that it was possible to make money online, but the key was persistence. The next few months were a roller coaster. Some days I'd make sales, and other days I'd make nothing. The thing that kept me going was that I was learning. I kept improving my ads, optimizing my website, and testing new products. Slowly, I started to see some traction. I even hired a freelancer to help me with graphic design and social media marketing. My first major breakthrough came when I created a product bundle that started selling consistently. It was a mix of popular products that complemented each other, and suddenly, sales began to roll in. By the time I reached my first $10,000 month, I realized I was onto something. But success wasn't just about making money. It was about building a brand and creating something that people could trust. I shifted my focus from simply selling products to developing a brand that stood for quality and customer satisfaction. I began reinvesting my profits into the business. I hired more people, customer service reps, ad specialists, and a product sourcing expert. We expanded our product range and started offering better shipping times. I also focused heavily on customer retention, offering discounts to repeat customers and asking for feedback on how to improve. At some point, I hit a wall. The business was growing, but so were the complexities. I was managing everything: product sourcing, customer service, marketing, and fulfillment, and I was burned out. That's when I realized I needed to scale. I started delegating tasks more effectively and brought in a team that could handle different aspects of the business. I hired an operations manager, which allowed me to step back and focus on strategy rather than daily operations. Fast forward 3 years, and my business was thriving. We had over 50 employees, a warehouse for order fulfillment, and a strong online presence. We were no longer just a dropshipping operation. We had moved into private labeling and developing our own products. I'd gone from living paycheck to paycheck, wondering if I was making the right decision by dropping out of college, to running a company that brought in millions of dollars a year. But despite all of this success, I never forgot where I came from. I kept my values intact. I stayed humble and focused on the bigger picture. I still worked hard every day, but I also made time for my team, for the people who had helped me along the way. I always remembered that the journey was just as important as the destination. One of the most valuable lessons I learned along the way was that failure isn't something to fear, it's something to embrace. Every mistake I made, every setback I encountered, was a lesson that made me better. It's easy to look at successful entrepreneurs and think they've always had it easy, but the reality is, everyone struggles. The key is to keep going, even when things seem impossible. Now, I'm able to look back on the years of struggle and uncertainty and feel proud of what I've built. But more importantly, I'm grateful for the lessons I've learned and the people I've met along the way. I'm not just an entrepreneur anymore. I'm someone who's built something from the ground up, and I'm proud of it. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone thinking about starting their own business, it's this: don't expect things to be easy, and don't expect overnight success. It takes hard work, perseverance, and a willingness to learn from every failure. But if you keep pushing forward, the rewards can be incredible. I started my journey as an entrepreneur the way most people do, with a dream, an idea, and a pile of student loans. But unlike most, I didn't have a clear-cut business plan or investors lined up. I didn't even know where to start. What I had, however, was something that was perhaps even more important: the relentless desire to succeed. It all started in my senior year of college. I was studying marketing and struggling to make ends meet. I had a part-time job at a local coffee shop and spent most of my free time tinkering with graphic design and social media. I always found a sense of peace in designing logos, flyers, and other marketing materials for local businesses. It was therapeutic for me. The problem was that the local businesses didn't seem to care much about the importance of good design. They were more focused on keeping the lights on than they were on creating a lasting brand. One day, while making a latte for a regular customer, the idea hit me. What if I could create a business around offering high-quality, custom branding for small businesses? I knew that many small businesses were struggling with branding, and I could help them stand out. I also realized that many of them didn't have the resources to hire expensive marketing agencies. I was young, hungry, and willing to work for next to nothing. I had no idea how I was going to make it work, but I was determined to try. I started by reaching out to local small business owners, offering my services in exchange for the chance to build my portfolio. I was clear with them that I didn't have a lot of experience, but I was willing to work hard and give them quality designs. Some laughed at me, others ignored me, but a few took a chance. And with each new client, I learned more and more about the nuances of branding, the power of storytelling, and the importance of consistency. One of my first clients was a small bakery down the street. They had been in business for years but had no recognizable brand. Their logo was a clip-art image of a cupcake, and their store signage looked like something from the early 2000s. I worked with them for weeks, brainstorming, designing, and refining. We finally settled on a logo that had a vintage feel but was modern enough to appeal to the millennial crowd. I created a complete branding package for them, including packaging designs, a color scheme, and social media templates. The bakery owner was thrilled with the result, and so was I. They saw a noticeable increase in foot traffic within weeks of launching their new brand. Their Instagram posts, now with professionally designed templates, garnered more likes and shares than ever before. I felt like I had cracked the code. The combination of offering affordable, high-quality design and helping small businesses make an impact was something I was genuinely passionate about. After that success, things began to snowball. Word of mouth spread, and before I knew it, I had enough clients to consider making this my full-time job. But that's when reality hit. I was still in college, I was barely making ends meet, and I had no idea how to scale a business. I started taking free business courses online to learn about things like taxes, contracts, and accounting. I also reached out to other entrepreneurs for advice and mentorship, many of whom were more than willing to help. At the same time, I made the bold decision to start a website. I had no idea how to build one, but I figured it out. I spent weeks learning how to code and designing the site myself. My website wasn't much, but it was enough to show potential clients that I was serious. The hardest part wasn't the design, it was the marketing. I knew that without a strong online presence, my business would go nowhere. I started posting content about branding on my blog, offering tips and advice to small business owners. I wrote about the importance of consistent design, the psychology of color, and how to create a brand identity that resonated with customers. To my surprise, people started reading it. I even started getting inquiries from other entrepreneurs who wanted me to help with their brands. Eventually, I took the plunge and quit my part-time job at the coffee shop to go full-time with my business. The decision was terrifying. I had no steady income, no investors, and barely any savings. But I believed in my ability to succeed. I made a promise to myself that I would never give up, no matter how hard it got. As my business grew, I faced countless challenges. There were late nights and early mornings, unexpected setbacks, and plenty of times when I thought I had made a huge mistake. But there were also moments of triumph, when a client's business took off, when I landed my first high-paying project, or when I saw a design I had created on a billboard. One of the biggest turning points in my business came when I decided to hire my first employee. I had been overwhelmed by the workload, and it became clear that I couldn't do it all on my own. Hiring someone was a huge leap, but it allowed me to focus on growing the business rather than drowning in the day-to-day tasks. The new employee was a graphic designer, and together, we expanded the services we offered, adding website design and digital marketing packages. Over the years, I learned a lot about what it takes to run a successful business. I learned how to manage cash flow, negotiate contracts, and deal with difficult clients. But more importantly, I learned that success isn't just about money. It's about creating something that you're proud of. My business wasn't just about helping small businesses grow. It was about using my creativity to make a real impact in the world. Today, I run a successful branding agency with a team of 15 people. We work with clients all over the country, helping them build brands that stand out and grow. I'm proud of what we've accomplished, but I know it hasn't been easy. The road to success is long and filled with obstacles, but every challenge has been worth it. Looking back, I can honestly say that the hardest part wasn't starting the business. It was staying committed to it when things weren't going well. There were times when I doubted myself, when I wasn't sure if I was cut out for entrepreneurship. But now, after all these years, I know that the key to success isn't about having all the answers up front. It's about being willing to learn, adapt, and keep pushing forward. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple: don't be afraid to fail. Every failure is a lesson, and every lesson brings you one step closer to success. Stay focused on your vision, be patient with yourself, and remember that the journey is just as important as the destination. I always thought entrepreneurship was a dream that only happened to lucky people. I spent most of my 20s hopping between various jobs, trying to figure out what I was meant to do. From a barista to a marketing assistant, and even a short stint at a tech startup, I could never find that one thing that made me feel excited to get up in the morning. My friends were out building their careers, and I was stuck wondering if there was something more out there for me. Then, one night, after getting yet another rejection email for a marketing role I thought I was perfect for, something clicked. I was sitting on my couch, scrolling through social media when I saw a post from a friend who was traveling through Europe while working remotely. The idea of being able to work on my own terms, create something from the ground up, and not be tied to a desk in a corporate office filled me with excitement. That was when I first seriously thought about starting my own business. I didn't have any magical idea for a product or service at the time, but I knew I wanted to build something that allowed me to live life on my own terms. I started reading books about entrepreneurship, watching YouTube videos, listening to podcasts, anything I could get my hands on. I quickly realized that I had a lot of learning to do. The more I read, the more I understood that entrepreneurship wasn't just about starting a business. It was about mindset, resilience, and knowing how to pivot when things go wrong. And trust me, things went wrong a lot. I decided to start small and look for a side hustle I could manage while still working my day job. After researching various options, I settled on launching an online store. The idea was to sell unique, handmade home decor items that I found through local artisans. I knew nothing about e-commerce, but I figured, how hard could it be? The answer: very hard. My first mistake was underestimating the amount of work that went into launching an online store. I built my website in a weekend using a simple drag-and-drop platform, which looked great in theory but was clunky in practice. I spent hours choosing products, setting prices, and creating what I thought were catchy product descriptions. But the real challenge came when I tried to market my store. I didn't have much money to spend on ads, and I quickly realized I had no idea how to get people to visit my website. I tried Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, everything I could think of. But after a month, I barely had any traffic, let alone sales. The frustration almost made me quit. I spent countless sleepless nights wondering what I was doing wrong. My friends and family were supportive, but they didn't really understand the challenges I was facing. I remember one day telling my mom that I felt like a failure because my business was going nowhere, and she simply said, "You've got to keep going. You'll figure it out." I wish I could say that everything changed overnight, but it didn't. The turning point came when I realized that I needed to stop looking for shortcuts and start learning the real skills that would make my business thrive. I invested in a few online courses about digital marketing, learned how to run effective ads on social media, and dove deep into SEO. Slowly but surely, things started clicking. One of the biggest lessons I learned was the importance of customer service. I had focused so much on getting people to visit my store that I neglected to provide an exceptional experience for the few customers I did have. When someone finally made a purchase, I made sure to personally thank them, ask for feedback, and offer them a discount on their next order. I also made it a point to respond to any customer inquiries or complaints as quickly as possible. This small gesture paid off big time. I started receiving more positive reviews, and people began recommending my store to their friends. As I gained more confidence in my ability to run the store, I decided to scale up. I sourced new products, expanded my social media presence, and even started experimenting with email marketing. I eventually hired a part-time assistant to help with packaging and customer service, freeing up more of my time to focus on growing the business. The orders started coming in faster than I could keep up with, but instead of feeling overwhelmed, I was excited. This was the breakthrough I had been waiting for. Then, in what felt like a cruel twist of fate, disaster struck. One of my suppliers went out of business, leaving me without a reliable source for some of my best-selling products. I panicked. I spent hours contacting other suppliers, trying to find a replacement, but the quality just wasn't the same. For weeks, I had to tell customers that I was out of stock, which hurt my sales and damaged my reputation. But instead of giving up, I took the opportunity to rethink my product offering entirely. I realized that I had been too reliant on third-party suppliers, and I needed to start building my own brand. I sourced raw materials and partnered with local artisans to create unique, custom items that no one else could replicate. It was a gamble, but it paid off. The new product line was a hit, and my brand started to stand out in a crowded market. Over the next couple of years, my business grew exponentially. I went from making a few $100s a month to six figures in revenue. I expanded my team, brought in new product lines, and even started selling internationally. But as the business grew, so did the challenges. I found myself working long hours, managing a larger team, and navigating the complexities of scaling a business. There were times when I felt completely overwhelmed, questioning whether it was all worth it. However, every time I faced a setback, I reminded myself of where I started. I had gone from being stuck in a series of dead-end jobs to running a successful business, and that was something worth fighting for. My journey wasn't perfect, far from it, but it taught me some of the most valuable lessons I've ever learned about perseverance, adaptability, and the power of believing in yourself. Looking back, I realized that the greatest gift entrepreneurship has given me is freedom. Not just financial freedom, but the ability to make my own decisions, take risks, and carve out my own path. It hasn't always been easy, and there have been plenty of times I thought about quitting, but every struggle along the way has shaped me into the person I am today. Now, as I sit in my home office, surrounded by the team I've built and the products I've created, I know I've found my calling. It wasn't a straight line to success. It was a winding road filled with setbacks, failures, and moments of doubt, but it's been worth every bit of effort. I'm living proof that even if you don't have all the answers at the start, if you keep pushing forward and learning from your mistakes, you can build something truly incredible. And to anyone out there thinking about taking the leap into entrepreneurship, my advice is simple. Start small, stay consistent, and don't be afraid to fail. The road will be tough, but if you keep your eyes on the prize and never stop learning, you'll get there. I had always been told that being an entrepreneur was a dream job, one where you could call your own shots, make your own schedule, and potentially rake in unlimited money. But no one warned me about the reality, the struggle, the isolation, and the constant fear of failure. This is the story of how I built a business from nothing and almost lost everything in the process. It all started back in 2016 when I was fresh out of college with a degree in business. I had this burning desire to start my own company. It wasn't because I was passionate about a specific industry, but because I had always been obsessed with the idea of autonomy. I was tired of working for others, following rules, and knowing that no matter how hard I worked, I would always be making someone else richer. I had grand ideas of owning a successful tech startup, making millions, and living life on my own terms. I had no experience in tech, no investors, and no real understanding of how to build a company. What I did have was an intense drive and a lot of optimism. I began brainstorming ideas and stumbled upon a niche I thought was untapped, a cloud-based project management tool that catered specifically to small businesses. At the time, there were a ton of options for big companies, but nothing that was affordable, simple, and focused on the needs of small teams. I figured if I could create a product that met that need, the world would come knocking. I started building the product on my own. I didn't know how to code, but I learned. I spent nights watching tutorials and piecing together lines of code until I had a beta version of my software. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. The next step was getting people to use it. I reached out to every small business I knew, offering free trials and explaining how my software could help them. Most ignored me, some said they didn't need it, and a few gave it a shot but didn't stick around. It was discouraging, to say the least, but I refused to give up. I kept reaching out, tweaking the product, and learning from each rejection. I soon realized that my biggest hurdle wasn't creating the product, it was getting people to trust me. I spent the next year grinding, working part-time jobs to fund my project, taking on freelance work, and pouring all my savings into marketing. I knew the key to success was to build a user base, so I spent hours on social media, writing blog posts, and engaging with potential customers. Slowly, the numbers began to grow, and my product started gaining traction. In 2018, after nearly 2 years of hustle, I got my first real break. A small business owner with 50 employees reached out to me, saying they loved my product and wanted to upgrade to the paid version. It was a huge moment for me, but it also marked the start of a whole new set of challenges. As I began to sign more customers, the financial pressure mounted. I had to upgrade my infrastructure, hire people, and keep the product evolving. At one point, I was working 100-hour weeks, trying to handle everything on my own. I knew I needed help, but I couldn't afford to hire full-time employees. That's when things started to fall apart. In 2019, the company hit a major snag. I had built my business entirely on the idea of bootstrapping and avoiding debt, but the growth had outpaced my personal finances. I had taken out small loans to keep things afloat, but they were no longer enough to sustain the company. I couldn't afford to pay my contractors, and I was forced to let go of the very people who had helped me build the company. Morale was low, and I was burning out. The tipping point came when my biggest client, the one who had helped me stay afloat, left. They switched to a competitor, citing our product's limitations. I was devastated. The loss of that one account meant I couldn't pay my bills, let alone invest in the business. I had to make a hard choice, shut down the company or find a way to reinvent myself. I took a step back and realized that I had been trying to do everything on my own for far too long. I needed help, but more importantly, I needed a different mindset. I had to stop being stubborn about doing everything myself and start thinking about how I could scale in a more sustainable way. I decided to bring in an experienced CTO who could help refine the product and make it more competitive. I also started reaching out to potential investors, despite my initial resistance to giving up any equity. If I didn't get outside funding, I'd be doomed. To my surprise, I secured a small seed round of funding from an angel investor who believed in my vision. With the additional capital, I was able to hire a few more employees, revamp the product, and relaunch it with a stronger focus on the customer experience. I also built a support system of mentors and advisors who had been through similar struggles and could help guide me. In 2020, after everything had collapsed and rebuilt, my company began to see a real surge in growth. The product had improved, the team was firing on all cylinders, and customers were signing up faster than ever. We went from struggling to stay afloat to having a solid customer base and steady cash flow. The turnaround didn't happen overnight, but it was like a switch had flipped. People started taking us seriously, and my vision was beginning to take shape. Fast forward to 2023, and the company is now a leading provider of project management software for small businesses, with over 1,000 active clients and a team of 25 employees. We've expanded to new markets, and I've even started giving talks at conferences, sharing my story of failure, perseverance, and growth. Looking back, I never would have imagined this journey when I first started. There were times I wanted to quit, moments when I thought I wasn't cut out for this, but I'm glad I didn't. The biggest lesson I've learned is that entrepreneurship is not a straight path. It's full of unexpected turns, setbacks, and sacrifices. The key to success isn't just about having a good idea. It's about being willing to adapt, learn from mistakes, and keep going even when everything seems lost. You'll face moments of doubt and fear, but those are the moments that define you. To anyone thinking about starting a business, my advice is simple. Don't expect it to be easy, and don't be afraid to fail. It's going to be messy, and it's going to hurt. But if you can push through the tough times, the rewards on the other side are more than worth it. I always thought I had it all figured out. I had the degree, the job at a prestigious company, and the success that society told me was the definition of making it. But something about that life didn't feel right. I wanted to create something of my own, something I could be proud of and leave a legacy behind. Little did I know, my journey to entrepreneurship would be a roller coaster of challenges, failures, and moments where I seriously questioned if I was making the right decision. But looking back, every setback made the victory that much sweeter. It all started 2 years ago. I was working as a senior marketing manager at a well-known tech firm. I was doing well, too well, maybe. I had a solid salary, excellent benefits, and even some recognition within the company. But deep down, I felt suffocated. I had become a cog in a machine. Every morning, I woke up, got dressed in my professional suit, and followed the same routine. It wasn't that I didn't like the work. In fact, I loved marketing. I loved strategizing, understanding consumer behavior, and creating campaigns that brought brands to life. But I didn't feel like I was building something of my own. At some point, the desire to do something different became overwhelming. I started thinking about starting my own company. But the problem was, I had no idea what kind of business I wanted to run. I didn't want to start just any business. I wanted to build something that solved a real problem. I wanted to create a company that would not only be profitable but would make a difference. That's when I came up with the idea for my first startup, a digital marketing agency. But here's the twist. I didn't want to be another cookie-cutter agency. I wanted to focus on helping small businesses thrive online, especially those that couldn't afford to spend big bucks on traditional advertising. The idea was simple: offer affordable, high-quality digital marketing services to local mom-and-pop stores, family-owned businesses, and entrepreneurs who lacked the knowledge or resources to build an online presence. I'd use my experience in marketing to help these businesses grow and succeed in the digital age. It felt like a worthy cause, and I was determined to see it through. The first few months were rough. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, drafting business plans, creating websites, and learning the ins and outs of building an agency. I was still working full-time at my corporate job, so I was essentially burning the candle at both ends. My weekends were spent in front of the computer, hustling to secure my first clients, while weekdays were consumed by meetings and reports. It was exhausting, but I was driven. By the end of the first quarter, I had managed to sign a few clients, mostly small local businesses. They were hesitant at first, understandably so. Why should they trust a newbie agency when there were bigger, established companies out there? I didn't have much to offer except for my passion and knowledge. But I made a promise to myself. I would work harder than anyone else in the game. I would be the agency that went above and beyond for its clients. I would create real results. The first breakthrough came when I helped a small local bakery in my town increase its online sales by 300% in just a few months. I used a combination of SEO, social media marketing, and email campaigns to get their brand in front of a larger audience. The owner was over the moon. She had no idea that marketing could have such a massive impact. That success story spread, and slowly but surely, more clients started reaching out. Despite these wins, the struggles never stopped. Managing a business on the side while keeping up with a full-time job felt like a juggling act. There were days when I didn't think I could keep up. There were also moments of doubt when I wondered if I was just chasing a pipe dream. My savings were dwindling, and I was getting close to burning out. On top of that, the corporate world was starting to feel like a trap. I was stuck in meetings I didn't care about, working on projects that didn't excite me. The urge to leave was growing stronger by the day. I knew I had to make a decision: keep playing it safe and stay in my corporate job, or take the leap and go all in on my startup. But the fear of failure was paralyzing. What if the business didn't take off? What if I ended up losing everything? The turning point came when my agency had a major breakthrough. One of my clients, a local fitness studio, went viral after a social media campaign I launched. The gym saw an overwhelming influx of new members, and I was credited with the success. This was the proof I needed. I realized that I was actually making an impact, and more importantly, I was good at this. So, I took the plunge. I quit my corporate job, which, to be honest, felt like the scariest decision I'd ever made. I had no safety net, no guaranteed paycheck, and a mountain of work ahead of me. But I was determined to make it work. The first 6 months after quitting my job were the hardest. The business was still in its infancy, and I was hustling to find clients. Every day was a struggle, but slowly, things started to turn around. I started building a team of passionate individuals who shared my vision. We began to develop a unique brand identity, positioning ourselves as the go-to agency for small businesses that wanted to make a big impact. As the business grew, so did the challenges. Managing a team, handling finances, dealing with client expectations, it was all a balancing act. But with each new challenge, I learned and adapted. My clients started to trust me more, and word-of-mouth referrals came pouring in. By the end of the first year, my agency was profitable. Not just a little profitable, but enough that I could finally breathe easy. The next year, I expanded the agency to offer even more services, everything from web design to pay-per-click advertising. We grew rapidly, and soon, we were working with businesses across the country. I even started mentoring other aspiring entrepreneurs, sharing my story and the lessons I had learned along the way. Looking back, I realized that every failure, every sleepless night, and every moment of doubt was necessary. It was all part of the process. Entrepreneurship isn't glamorous. It's a roller coaster with ups and downs, twists and turns. But in the end, it's incredibly rewarding. I built something from scratch, something that's bigger than me. I may not have the corporate job with a fancy title anymore, but I have something far more valuable: the freedom to live life on my terms and the satisfaction of knowing that I helped countless small businesses grow and thrive. If there's one piece of advice I'd give to anyone thinking of starting a business, it's this: trust yourself, take risks, and never give up. The road is tough, but the destination is worth it. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.